The night before they took her daughter, Tessari walked alone through the whispering glade behind her home. The blossoms of the lanari trees swayed gently above her, each petal glowing faintly in the dark, bioluminescent air of Nerul. The breeze smelled of salt and root wine. It was the kind of stillness only her world knew, a silence where every living thing breathed together. Tessari was a botanist, but not a famous one. Her work was quiet. She cultivated heritage seeds, restored degraded soils, and taught younglings about the gentleness of rootwork. Her hands were always stained green with pollen or brown with dirt. But in that moment, they trembled. She had felt it. A change in the air. Like the soil before a quake, or the stillness before a flood. And she was right. By morning, the peace custodians had arrived. 3 ships, sleek and silver, bearing the blue and white crest of the Earth-centered Interstellar Authority. They landed in the village square without warning, without ceremony. Tessari had stepped out of her greenhouse to find them standing at her door. Their faces were hidden behind visors. Their voices processed through soft, synthetic harmonics designed to soothe compliance. "You are Tessari of Nerul?" "Yes," she said slowly, shielding her daughter behind her. "What is this?" "Your child has been identified for emotional stability reassessment under Interstellar Protocol 49A. "What? Reassessment?" "She's 5. She exhibits bonding patterns incompatible with long-term cognitive neutrality. For her safety, and yours, she will be taken into protective custody." Tessari stepped back. "She is not unstable. She's kind. She's joyful. She sings to the flowers and hugs strangers." "Precisely." The words hit harder than a blow. Viral, her daughter, was clinging to her waist, her wide black eyes shining with confusion. Her long lavender hair, tied in messy braids, shimmered under the rising sun. Tessari's voice cracked. "You can't take her. Please. I haven't done anything wrong." The custodians reached forward. She fought. She screamed. She used her body like a shield, like a weapon. But they moved with clinical precision. And when they pried Viral from her arms, she felt something tear that would never heal. No violence was used. No bruises left. Just emptiness. When they left, the village elders watched silently from behind curtained windows. Nerul was a peaceful world, unarmed, obedient to the Alliance. Resistance was not in their nature. That night, Tessari collapsed beside the empty cradle in her home. Her body ached. Her voice was gone. Her thoughts were white noise. But something inside her refused to break. She opened an old drawer and removed a small crystal communicator, the kind banned by the Interstellar Council for its untraceable frequencies. It had been a gift, years ago, from a man she had once trusted. Silas Moreno. She activated it. The signal reached a drifting station called the Hollow Reef, orbiting the unclaimed moon of Lenneth. A forgotten place. Once a cargo waypoint. Now home to old ghosts and older regrets. Silas Moreno was not what he used to be. Once, he'd been Earth's diplomatic envoy to the Teleran cluster. A negotiator, a voice of peace. He had stood on marble floors in high towers, making promises with clean hands. Now, he lived alone in a modified hydroponic vessel, growing bitter fruit and trading supplies with salvagers. He wore patchy work jackets and carried the weight of 1,000 decisions. When the crystal flared to life, he didn't answer immediately. He stared at the signal code, unmistakably Nerelian. Unmistakably hers. He opened the link. Her face appeared. Older. Sadder. Still beautiful. "Silas," she whispered. They took her. He felt the air leave his lungs. By the time Tessari arrived at the Hollow Reef, she had not eaten in 2 days. The journey had been made in a borrowed cargo shuttle, barely spaceworthy, guided only by grit and desperation. Silas met her on the landing deck. You came fast, she said, her voice cracked and dry. You called. There was a long silence. He led her inside. Made her sit. Poured her water. Made food. She ate with shaking hands. Tell me, he said. She did. Every word felt like thorns pulled from flesh. He listened. When she finished, he said nothing for a long while. Arcadia frame, he said finally. It was supposed to be voluntary. Evaluative. They promised no child would be taken without due process. They lied. They always do. Silas stood. His back was stiffer than she remembered. His hands, rougher. Do you know where they took her exactly? Not yet. The records are buried. But she was taken by Earth custodians. That narrows it. He nodded. Then did something unexpected. He reached out, gently, and took her hand. Her fingers flinched, but then relaxed. You shouldn't get involved, she whispered. They'll brand you a traitor. They already did. Years ago. Why? He met her eyes. Because I left you. Her breath caught. He let go. We leave for Cradle Station tomorrow. That's where the custody transports get refueled before heading to Outer Arcs. I know someone who still owes me answers. Cradle Station was not a place of warmth. It floated in low orbit above a gas dwarf, surrounded by scavengers and escort frigates. Its corridors reeked of oil, ozone, and desperation. Tessari and Silas wore generic transport uniforms, their faces partially obscured by hoods. Inside, the station bustled with movement, peacekeepers, engineers, merchants, and officers passing in a blur of noise and indifference. Silas guided them to a maintenance sector. Behind a rusted panel, he knocked 5 times. The door opened. Inside was a cluttered shop filled with tech scraps and flickering lights. A woman sat at a workbench, her shaved head haloed by magnifier lenses. Silas. Unia. She pulled off the lenses. Her eyes were sharp. What the hell are you doing here? Looking for my daughter. Unia frowned. You don't have a daughter. He glanced at Tessari. Oh, Unia said. You mean her. Tessari stepped forward. They took my child. Without cause. We need to know where she was sent. Unia looked between them. That's a short path to a long prison. Silas leaned in. Help us. Please. Unia sighed. You still have that look. The one that says you think you can change things. He didn't answer. She turned to her console. Typed rapidly. Cross-checked records. Minutes passed. Finally, she turned. She's listed under a red-tier custody transfer. Arcadia Frame, Sector 7, off Delvin Ridge. Tessari gasped. That's a reconditioning facility. They call it a developmental sanctuary now, Unia said. But it's the same core design. Psychological remapping. Behavioral correction. Tessari's hands trembled. Silas steadied her. Unia narrowed her eyes. What are you planning? We're going to get her out. You're going to die. Silas smiled. Not if we move quietly. Not if you help. Unia hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, there's a smuggler who runs shadow routes through Delvin. Goes by Nilo. He won't like you. He likes music and bribes. Bring both. The bar where Nilo docked was called the Empty Note. A converted asteroid silo, it pulsed with rhythmic vibrations from subsonic speakers. Crystalline wine poured through floating spirals. The music was haunting. They found Nilo in a corner booth, playing a stringed instrument that looked part organic. He was thin, wiry, with sky-colored eyes and silver tattoos along his throat. Silas approached. We need a quiet ride through Delvin Ridge. To Arcadia Frame. Nilo didn't stop playing. That's not a ride. That's a suicide pact. Tessari stepped forward. They took my child. He looked at her for a long time. Then played a few more notes. Music or money? Silas handed over a stack of old Earth currency. Nilo grinned. Welcome aboard. That night, as they prepared for departure, Tessari sat in the ship's garden pod. It was a small space, filled with fragrant moss and tiny light flowers. She stared at the sky. Silas joined her quietly. You loved her, she said. I never stopped. Even after you left. Especially after. She didn't respond. I thought if I stayed, he said softly, you'd be targeted. They warned me. Said any union would be marked suspect. So I chose safety. I thought it would protect you. You were wrong. He nodded. I know. Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. Fingers intertwined. For the first time since the custodians came, Tessari let herself cry. As Nilo's ship broke atmosphere, headed toward Delvin, a new resolve filled the air. Not of vengeance. Not of war. But of love. And love, as history would soon remember, moves stars. The city of Leaner, shimmered beneath a dome of artificial starlight, a pale imitation of the cosmos it had long abandoned. Above the delicate spires and silver towers, orbital satellites cast down programmed constellations. They twinkled like lies. Siona stood at the highest balcony of the Tiervault Institute, her hair whipping softly in the synthetic wind. The gown she wore clung to her form like a second skin, dark as obsidian, shimmering faintly with blue threads like a forgotten night sky. She clutched the edge of the railing, knuckles pale, her eyes tracing the empty horizon. It had been 47 cycles since they took her daughter. They called it protective relocation. They said her child, Lyri, had exhibited unregulated harmonics, an energy surge unrecognized in pureborn humans. The council deemed her dangerous. A risk. A subject. So they took her away. And Siona had begged. Screamed. Broken. No one listened. Until Riven. Riven Elon, the outsider. Not born of Leaner. Not aligned with the planetary accord. A quiet man with copper-toned skin, dark, tired eyes, and hands marked with burn scars from machines older than this city's stones. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a leader. He was something far more dangerous. He was kind. He'd found her collapsed on the steel steps of the archives 3 weeks after the loss. He'd offered her a cloth, not a command. Water, not rhetoric. No questions, just presence. He didn't speak much, not at first. But he stayed. And tonight, she needed him more than ever. A soft chime broke the silence behind her, the sound of his boots light against the glass floor. She didn't turn. They're meeting again, he said. His voice was low, husky. The council. To finalize the next phase of the child separation protocols. Siona exhaled, slow and bitter. Another euphemism for erasure. Riven stepped beside her, close enough for warmth but not suffocation. You don't have to face this alone. I've already lost her, Riven. No, he said firmly. They've hidden her. That's not the same. She turned to face him. The moonlight caught the delicate scar along his jaw, the one he never explained. His eyes, usually veiled and quiet, now burned with a steady flame. How can you still believe we can change anything? Riven reached into his coat and withdrew a thin silver band, a worn-out child's bracelet, still embedded with flickering micro-emitters. I found this, he said. On a restricted deck of the Ark Spire. I ran a trace. The DNA matches yours. Siona's heart stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Leery. She's alive, Siona. Not erased. Not destroyed. Just, locked away. The tears came before she could stop them. She gripped the bracelet, knuckles white, her body trembling like a harp string in the wind. I thought I'd never see her again. Riven moved closer, one hand on her shoulder, grounding her. I can find her. But I can't do it without you. She looked up at him. Why? He held her gaze for a long moment before answering. Because I think you're the only person who hasn't stopped believing she's worth saving. The wind howled faintly outside the dome, but inside her chest bloomed the first flicker of something she thought long gone, hope. They met again beneath the library vault 2 nights later, in the hidden atrium where the light from above was fractured by overgrown vines and ancient glass panels. Riven spread out schematics, flickering blueprints of the arc spire's underground conduits. She's being kept beneath Layer 9, he said. That zone isn't mapped for public access. It's considered biohazard restricted. Which means they're doing something to her. Siona clenched her fists. Experiments. Most likely. The harmonization project was abandoned 50 years ago. The council's bringing it back in secret. Using children with unknown energy responses as catalysts. She was 5, Siona whispered. 5. She loved flowers that glowed in the dark and asked questions no one could answer. She wasn't a catalyst, she was a girl. Riven looked at her with quiet intensity. That's why we need to get her out. Siona studied the map. There's no direct line down. No. But I can get us into Layer 7 through the maintenance ducts. After that, we improvise. She raised an eyebrow. You mean risk death? His lips twitched. That's one way to say it. Siona leaned in closer, her shoulder brushing his. Her voice dropped. You're sure about this? He looked at her, and for once his eyes didn't hold fear, only resolve. With every part of me. They moved at dusk, blending into the evening shifts. The tier vault's lower sectors weren't patrolled as heavily, security trusted the sealed floors and locked airlocks to do their job. Riven cracked the first barrier with a filament key that buzzed softly against his palm. The door opened with a hiss. Ladies first, he whispered. Siona smirked. You just don't want to trip the sensors. They descended through ventilation shafts and power conduits, the walls growing darker and warmer the deeper they went. It smelled of metal and recycled air, tinged with something sterile and wrong. Layer 7 was nothing like the clean architecture above. It was industrial, brutalist concrete slabs and exposed wires. Lights flickered overhead like broken memories. I hate this place, Siona muttered. Riven nodded. You're not the only one. They passed 3 deactivated drones, each marked with the sigil of the harmonization program. Faint static buzzed from the walls, a low hum that made Siona's skin crawl. She's down there, Riven whispered, pointing to a hatch sealed with biometric locks. Beyond this is Layer 8. Then it gets harder. Siona pressed her hand to the metal. She closed her eyes. And then, without warning, she felt her. A faint warmth. A tether. A whisper in her mind, Mama. She staggered back, breath caught in her throat. Riven caught her, steadying her against the wall. She's awake, Siona gasped. She's reaching out. Riven stared at her. She bonded to you. Through the harmonics. I didn't even know I was connected like that. He placed his hand gently over hers. Then let that guide us. They reached Layer 9 at midnight. The descent had been brutal, dodging infrared traps, crawling through filtration tubes, and overriding at least 6 biometric failsafes. Siona's arms ached. Riven had sliced his palm open, blood now dried along the edge of his sleeve. But they made it. Before them stood a glass chamber, sterile, sealed, humming with energy. And inside floated a small girl, her brown curls suspended in weightless solution, eyes closed, surrounded by glowing white threads that pulsed like heartbeat. Leary, Siona's voice cracked. Riven approached the console. She's alive. Pulse normal. Neural interface intact. But, they're preparing a sequence. What kind? Energy drain. Siona paled. She'll die. Not if we stop it now. Riven's fingers flew across the interface, overriding protocols. Siona pressed her forehead to the glass. Inside, Leary stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. And when she saw her mother, her lips formed one word, silent but unmistakable. Mama. Siona's tears fell like stars. I'm here, she whispered. I'm here, baby. The chamber hissed. The threads dissolved. A low alarm began to sound. Riven turned. They're coming. Siona burst into the chamber as the pod opened. She gathered Leary in her arms, warm and trembling, whispering over and over, I've got you. I've got you. Riven moved to cover them, pulling out a flash emitter. We've got 2 minutes. The corridor behind them lit up, footsteps, weapons, voices. But Riven stood firm, his voice calm. Go. I'll hold them. No, Siona said. You're not dying here. Then we all die. But as the lights flashed closer and the shadows pressed in, Leary raised her small hand. And the hallway fell silent. A wave of invisible energy blasted outward, gentle, but powerful. The guards stumbled, their weapons discharging harmless sparks. The alarms shorted. The corridor fell into darkness. Leary's eyes glowed faint gold. Siona held her tighter. Riven stared in wonder. She's not dangerous, he whispered. She's magnificent. They escaped into the upper sectors before sunrise. Disguised as medtechs, with Leary wrapped in a thermal veil, they passed checkpoints unnoticed. Siona's heart hammered the entire time, but she didn't let go of her daughter once. By midday, they reached a safe house at the city's edge, a broken observatory overlooking the remains of a dried sea. Riven collapsed on the floor, breathing hard. I think, that was the most illegal thing I've ever done. Siona smiled through tears. Thank you. He looked up at her, eyes soft. I would have done it even if she weren't your daughter. I know. She sat beside him, Leary curled between them, her little hand grasping Riven's sleeve. She likes you, Siona said gently. He chuckled. Good taste. The room was quiet, warm. The stars above the dome flickered into life, hollow imitations, but still beautiful. Siona leaned her head against his shoulder. You stayed, she said. When I had no one. You believed in me. Riven's voice was low. I didn't believe in anything until I met you. Siona turned to him. You risked your life. For a stranger. You weren't a stranger after that first night. Their faces were close now, breath mingling. Leary had fallen asleep between them, her little breaths soft and steady. Siona placed her hand gently on his chest. Riven. He kissed her. Softly. Carefully. And in that ruined observatory, with the stars above and a child safe in her mother's arms, the galaxy shifted, not from war, or power, but from something infinitely more dangerous. Love. The observatory was silent. Time didn't move in the way it once had. Not here. Not after rescue. Not after love had taken root between broken pieces. The winds outside whispered through cracked steel and shattered glass, carrying the soft scent of salt from the long-evaporated sea below. In the quiet, Siona sat by the window with her daughter asleep in her lap, head tucked under her chin. Leary breathed softly, safe, warm, whole. Siona barely moved. Every time she blinked, she feared waking from a dream. Across the room, Riven was dismantling a pulse relay scavenged from one of the damaged drones. He was trying to mask their signal, buy them time before the council found them again. His fingers were steady, but the muscles in his jaw were tight. He hadn't slept in days. Siona watched him for a long while. Then, when Leary stirred and turned in her arms, she laid the child gently on the pile of blankets and stood. She crossed the floor quietly and crouched beside Riven. "You're not made of stone, you know." He didn't look up. "Can't afford softness." "Not yet. You haven't rested." He tightened a bolt, almost too hard. "We're being traced. I blocked the last 3 sweeps, but they're narrowing in. The moment they detect harmonics again." "She's just a little girl, Riven. She's the girl they're looking for." He finally glanced at her. There was weariness in his eyes, but deeper than that, something else. A fear so tangled with care it had nowhere else to go. Siona sat down beside him and reached for his hand. It was cold, calloused, stained with oil and old blood. She held it anyway. "You don't have to carry all this alone," she said gently. "I'm not leaving." He didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, he whispered, "When they took your daughter, I wanted to go to the council gates and scream until they buried me in silence." She looked at him, startled. "I didn't even know you then," she said. "I knew you," he replied, voice trembling. "I'd seen you before. Walking the promenade with her. I never had a family. Never thought I wanted one. But then I watched you hold her, teach her the names of stars. You made me feel like something better was possible." He turned to face her fully now, eyes burning. "And when I saw you again, broken and alone, I couldn't stand by." Tears stung Siona's eyes. "I thought I was invisible." "You were, until you weren't." She reached up, touched his cheek. The scar was cool beneath her fingers. Riven leaned into the touch. And then, slowly, with the soft vulnerability only silence could allow, they kissed again. Not like the first time, desperate and uncertain. This was slower. Sure. A confirmation of all the unsaid things between them. When they pulled away, breath mingling, Riven's voice broke the hush. "If this is the last place we ever see," he said, "I want it to be where I told you the truth." She leaned closer, her forehead against his. "Then don't wait. Tell me now." He inhaled shakily. "I love you." The words landed softly between them. And they didn't need to be answered, only held. By morning, the world shifted again. Leary was awake and humming, an untrained harmony that bent the shadows gently away from the room. She giggled when the sunbeam hit her nose. When Riven tossed her a small gear-shaped trinket he'd repurposed into a toy, she squealed and ran in circles, her bare feet padding across the floor like starlight. "She doesn't remember the chamber," Siona whispered. "Good," Riven replied. "Let her remember this instead." They began forming a plan, not for escape, but for life. They couldn't hide forever. But they could find a place where harmonics weren't feared. Where a child with golden eyes and unearthly light wasn't seen as a weapon. "There's a colony on Varys Kai," Riven said one evening. "Old, neutral ground. They don't follow council law. They welcome the gifted." Siona raised an eyebrow. "You mean smugglers and exile mystics?" "Exactly." She smiled. "Sounds like paradise." Riven shrugged. "It's a start." But before they could leave, the stars changed. And with them, everything else. It started with a dream. Leary woke screaming in the night, her voice echoing through the observatory like shattered glass. Siona was beside her in a second, pulling her close. "What is it, baby?" Leary's eyes were wide. "Golden. Glowing. The silver mask, it's coming, it knows your name. Siona froze. What mask? Leary clutched her tighter, trembling. He was in the walls, he touched the air, he said you belonged to the Accord. Across the room, Riven was already pulling on his jacket. She's having a harmonic echo. Her connection to other gifted minds is growing. Then someone sent that dream to her. Riven nodded grimly. Or worse. Someone is listening through her. Siona held Leary closer. Can we stop it? Riven moved to the relay console and flicked off their harmonic suppressor. Not here. Not anymore. They're coming. They fled before sunrise. Using an old sea skimmer that barely hovered above the dry basin, Riven piloted them west toward the edge of the atmospheric dome. Siona sat with Leary strapped against her chest, the child drowsy and murmuring under her breath in a half-sleep. They passed shattered temples of crystal and half-buried transport pods from wars long forgotten. At one point, they saw the wreck of a council sky prison half sunk into the desert. Bones peeked through the sand like whispers of judgment. But none of it stopped them. They had one destination now, the glass bridge. It was a myth, mostly. A station built over the fault between two tectonic fields, designed to harvest geothermal energy but long since abandoned after tremors shattered its foundations. But more importantly, it was a known gateway for off-grid jumps. If they could reach it, they could activate a private beacon, summon a trade runner from the exile world of Verisky, and disappear. That was the plan. Until the sky cracked. At first, it looked like lightning. A single bolt across the pink sky. But it didn't vanish. It hung, like a tear in the fabric of reality. Then came the sound. Not thunder. Not wind. A low, resonant pulse. A harmonic inversion so deep it made the ground shake and Siona's vision blur. She clutched Leary tighter. Riven pulled the skimmer into a narrow rock trench just as a massive shadow streaked across the basin above them. A ship. Not council. Not private. Something older. It hovered in silence, shaped like a crescent, edges shimmering with faint white fire. From its underside, a figure dropped, silver-clad, faceless. Riven cursed. Harmonic hunter. Siona turned sharply. What? They're not council. They're Accord mercenaries, paid to hunt down unstable anomalies. Leary? No, he said. You. Her blood ran cold. The figure landed in the dust, standing straight, unmoving. A voice rang out, not spoken, but pressed into their skulls like an iron brand. Siona Vale. You have been marked by your daughter's resonance. You are considered a vector. Surrender immediately. Siona held Leary tighter. I'm not going anywhere. You will comply. Or your child will break. Riven moved between them. You'll have to go through me first. Not necessary. Only one heartbeat needs to stop. The hunter raised its hand. Light pulsed. Then. The world stopped. Siona screamed, raising her hand not to block, but to pull. A pulse shot from her chest, a flash of golden blue light that shattered the air and slammed into the hunter like a tidal wave. The ground cratered. The wind howled. When the light faded, the hunter lay buried under a half-ton of rock in silence. Siona collapsed to her knees. Riven ran to her, catching both her and Leary before they hit the dust. You have harmonic energy. She shook her head, dazed. I didn't. I never knew. Leary looked up at her, eyes wide. You heard me, the girl whispered. You're like me. Siona stared at her hands. And for the first time, they glowed. They reached the glass bridge by nightfall. The station was barely functional, half submerged in fault line mist and cracked from heat surges. But Riven found a signal console in a forgotten upper wing and began powering the beacon. "You were born on one of the old lunar domes, weren't you?" he asked softly. Siona nodded. "My mother died during the collapse. I was raised by a cousin who never let me speak of the dreams. The harmonics? I think they've always been there. But I buried them so deep I forgot." Riven turned to her. "They'll never stop coming for you now. I know." He stepped closer. "So don't run anymore." She looked at him, puzzled. "Then what?" "Fight. Together." Siona took his hand. "You're not afraid?" He pulled her close. "Not when I'm with you." She kissed him then, fiercely, because there was no tomorrow promised. Just this heartbeat. This family. This love. And across the stars, as the beacon flared into life, 3 ships stirred from sleep on Very's Kai. They were coming. Not to take. But to protect. In the pale morning after the storm, the old relay tower at the edge of the glass bridge hummed softly. Its voice, once meant to call freight ships and survey drones, now whispered a single signal across systems long thought dead. Riven adjusted the emitter crystal on the console and squinted at the frequency bloom across the holopanel. "It's working," he muttered. "They've received it." Siona stood behind him with Leary balanced against her hip. The little girl's golden eyes were half-lidded in sleep, arms draped around her mother's shoulders. Her presence radiated a quiet heat now, faint pulses of harmonic energy cycling in her chest like the rhythm of stars. "And they're coming?" Siona asked. "Yes," Riven replied. "Very's Kai has dispatched a ship. Independent. Off-record. It'll arrive within 20 hours. Siona exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. The promise of safety felt distant. Fragile. Even with the hunter destroyed. Even after the signal. Especially after what she'd done. Riven had seen her, truly seen her. Not just as a mother, or a woman fighting to reclaim her daughter, but as something else entirely. As someone with power. She hadn't used harmonics in her conscious memory. The idea that she had them had always been a buried myth, one she'd cast aside in favor of living, surviving, blending in. But that night, when the hunter reached for Leary, when death whispered her name, she didn't think. She acted. The force that erupted from her had been instinctual. Untrained. Violent. But beneath the raw impact was something else. Something older. Something felt. Leary had called it the echo. Now Siona felt it too. A subtle hum at the edges of her skin, rising and falling with her heartbeat. A tether that bound her to her daughter, not through biology alone, but through resonance. Through belonging. The glass bridge was no longer a bridge. It had collapsed decades ago during a tectonic quake, leaving only its central terminal intact, rising from the fault line like a solemn pillar over the Dead Sea. The few functioning rooms were filled with dust and broken data slates. The air tasted faintly of metal and long-dead power grids. Riven made a temporary shelter in the old navigation dome, stringing up thermal panels and scavenging heat cores from the old fusion relays. It wasn't home. But it was theirs, for now. That evening, after Leary had finally drifted into a deeper sleep, wrapped in a nest of heat blankets and humming faint lullabies only she could hear, Siona sat on the grated floor beside Riven, a bowl of rehydrated soup warming her hands. The light from the stars above streamed in through the cracked observatory glass. Not artificial this time, real stars, vast and bright, stretching across the cosmos like brushstrokes of fire. Riven was quiet, lost in thought. "You're thinking about the hunter," Siona said. He nodded. "That energy you used, it wasn't just a reflex. You're wondering what else I can do. I'm wondering if you're the reason Leary is what she is." Siona's breath hitched. "You think I passed it on?" "Maybe not passed," he said carefully. Maybe it's just, awakening in both of you. Together. She lowered her bowl. I don't want her to be hunted her whole life. Then teach her not to run, Riven said. Siona looked at him. He wasn't challenging her. He was inviting her. Show her what it means to own her power, he continued. To shape it with compassion. Like you did. I don't know how, she whispered. Then we figure it out. Together. He reached out, fingers brushing hers. The warmth of his skin steadied her. I've never had a partner in anything, she said. You have one now. They stayed there, hand in hand, the echo between them growing stronger. The very Sky ship arrived early. It wasn't a vessel by council standards. It looked like a living reef, organic, curved, trailing silver roots of bioconductive tendrils through space. When it landed near the fractured shell of the relay tower, it made no sound. No lights. No weapons. Just a pulse, a low, steady vibration that Siona felt in her chest before she saw the figures emerging from the ship. 3 of them. 2 tall, cloaked in deep robes of dark green and silver. And 1 shorter figure, a woman, perhaps human, perhaps not, whose skin shimmered like dust-colored glass. Her eyes were completely white, no pupils. Riven stepped forward cautiously. The woman bowed her head slightly. Siona Vale, she said, her voice soft but clear. We have heard your echo. We have come to offer passage. Siona stepped forward, clutching Lyri's hand. You're from very Sky? Yes. I am called Niel. My kin walk the path of harmonics. We are not a people of war. We are a people of listening. And your daughter's song is unlike any we've ever known. She's not a weapon, Siona said quickly. No, Niel replied. She is a new chord in the old song. Riven stepped beside them. And what about the accord? The council? They cannot follow where we go. You'll protect her. Niel turned her head slightly. Not for her. But with her. There is a difference. Siona's heart surged. I want to go with her, she said. Wherever you take her. You will be welcome. Niel turned to Lyri and knelt. Do you want to come with us, little star? Lyri looked up at her mother, then at Riven. Will Riven come too? Siona looked at him. And in that moment, Riven didn't hesitate. If you'll have me. Niel smiled. Then let the bond be kept. They boarded the ship an hour later. Inside, it was nothing like any craft Siona had ever seen. The walls breathed, slowly expanding and contracting like lungs. Warm pulses of color moved through translucent panels, responding to touch and tone. The air smelled of lavender and memory. There were no weapons. No consoles. Everything was harmonic interface, sound, frequency, intent. As they walked deeper into the vessel, Lyri brushed her fingers along the wall and the ship responded, soft lights blooming like petals wherever she touched. She's never been so calm, Siona murmured. She feels safe, Riven said. And for the first time since she lost her child, so did she. They traveled for 3 days. The ship moved through phase currents rather than mapped routes. Niel explained that they navigated by echopaths, resonant traces left by emotional events across time. It's not unlike music, she said. Every emotion leaves a note. We simply follow the most beautiful ones. During those days, Siona began to learn. Niel showed her how to breathe in cadence with her own harmonics, how to feel the presence of her child not as a fear of loss but as a presence of love. She guided her in small exercises, moving energy, calming storms, channeling emotion not into violence but into stillness. And Riven. Riven watched her with a kind of quiet awe. One night, as Siona stood in the ship's dream room, an open chamber where light shimmered like water around floating memory crystals, he joined her, barefoot, silent. She turned. Are you afraid of what I'm becoming? He shook his head. No. I'm in love with what you already are. She stepped closer. I didn't know this part of me existed. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. It was never hidden. It was just waiting. She kissed him then, deeper this time, slower. Less desperation. More belonging. And when they held each other that night, it wasn't in fear or grief. It was in the simple silence between two heartbeats, where no one had to run, and no one had to pretend. But peace never lasts long. On the fourth day, the ship shuddered. Not violently. Not with damage. But with dread. Niel entered the central chamber, her expression unreadable. They found us. Riven rose. How? Niel hesitated. It wasn't Leary. It was you, Siona. Siona froze. Me. Your resonance is rare. And deep. It echoes back through time. They've been tracking you longer than you realized. Siona's heart pounded. Then I have to leave the ship. Led them away. No, Riven said instantly. We stay together. Leary clutched her mother's hand. Don't go, Mama. Niel nodded. There may be another way. She turned to Siona. You are an echo. But echoes can be rewritten. Later that night, Siona lay in the resonance chamber, surrounded by memory crystals from the ship's archives. Niel hovered her hands above her, guiding frequencies through strands of light and sound. It will not erase who you are, she said. Only dampen the song. So you may rest. Will I still hear her? Siona asked, glancing at Leary, asleep nearby. Niel smiled. Always. Riven knelt beside her and took her hand. I'm right here. And as the resonance flowed over her body, like waves over sand, Siona closed her eyes. And let go. Of fear. Of guilt. Of silence. She floated in a sea of stars, her daughter's laughter echoing in every breath, Riven's warmth pressed into her hand. And for once. She wasn't running.